everyone, and welcome back to the Smart Tea podcast, where we talk about the lives of scientists and innovators who shape the world. I'm Aarati.
And I'm her mom, Jyoti.
You know, Mom, normally a day or two before we sit and record, you start asking me for hints about what the episode is about.
Yes, you know I detest surprises. You know this.
Yes.
And yet
Yes.
you insist on surprising me with the story.
Yes, but I love your genuine reactions. So I always do my very best, not to tell you much about what the episode is going to be about.
Yes, you are very close-lipped when you decide to be. I know this about you.
So today, because of that, you are flying blind, as it were.
I am. It's a rough feeling.
I know.
If I were a drinker, I would drink some couple of shots to smooth this ride.
It's fitting, though, because we're so close to Halloween.
Yes.
And I wanted to do somewhat of a spooky themed episode.
I'm already spooked, man. You want to make it more spooky with your story?
Yes.
I'm already spooked that I have no clue what you're going to talk about.
Anxiety on the edge of your seat? Yes.
Edge of the seat, the low-level anxiety curdling in my tummy.
No, you're going to like it. You're really going to like it. So today's episode, we are going to be talking about a scientist named Dr. Donald Griffin.
Okay.
And he is one of the most famous bat scientists.
Bat?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
He's the scientist who basically figured out how bats are able to navigate around using echolocation.
Yes.
But he also did a lot of animal behavior studies in general. He studied a lot of different animals. So bats is what he's most famous for, but he has done a lot. So
wonderful. Sounds like a fun guy. Let's listen.
So starting off with his childhood, he was born in 1915 in Southampton, New York. His family moved around New York for the first 9 years of his life until ultimately settling down in Barnstable, Massachusetts. Donald Griffin went by Don. His parents actually had a son before Don was born named Gerald, but he died as an infant. So when Don was born, his parents were sometimes maybe a bit overprotective of him.
Naturally. Yeah, that kind of trauma doesn't go away that easy.
Yeah, and other than that, Don was an only child, so he was brought up as an only child.
That also leads to a bit of overprotectiveness, even without the past trauma of a lost child.
Yeah. His father, Henry Farrand Griffin, was educated at Yale and became a reporter who covered notable events like Theodore Roosevelt's Bull Moose campaign. Yeah. Had you heard about that?
That's interesting. No, I don't know about this. What is this Bull Moose campaign?
Yeah, I was like, I'm so sure I've learned about this in high school history at some point and then totally forgot. So a little bit off topic, but his Bull Moose campaign was basically Theodore Roosevelt created at one point a third party that was more progressive than either Democrat or the Republican Party.
Got it.
And so for a brief time in America, we had three parties.
Traction. Yeah. He had traction.
Yes. So Don's father covered that campaign. And he also covered the sinking of the Titanic. So he's covering some
big things. He has really looked at some big issues. Yes.
Yeah, huge. When Don was born, Henry turned to advertising, but he had to retire early due to health reasons.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, just some blood pressure things, and he had to reduce his stress, I think. So after retirement, he became somewhat of an amateur historian, reading translated Greek and Roman texts and writing historical novels and essays. So he was really big into literature and writing. Don's mother, Mary Whitney Redfield Griffin, was also very highly educated for a woman at that time. When Don was little, she would read to him so much that his father was afraid that Don wouldn't learn to read for himself.
Oh,
but
nice.
Also, to his father's dismay, Don's favorite pieces of quote-unquote literature were wildlife and hunting magazines.
He should not be dismayed by that.
No, he was like, why aren't you at least listen to Shakespeare or something?
Yeah,
some Greek novel.
Look at the history of, he was more of a historian.
Yeah, and not just that. It's like, these are not great pieces of literature. Read something worth it. Read something good. Read a good story, classic story. you know?
Got it. But it's like everyday practical life. So I,
Yeah.
I feel very legit.
Yes. I think he just liked looking at the animals, to be honest, at that
Of course.
age. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don's uncles and extended family were also very impressive.
Hmm.
Most notably, though, his mom's brother, Uncle Alfred Redfield, was a biology professor at Harvard, an avid bird watcher, and one of the founders of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah,
Oceanographic on one side and the birds on the other. Maybe he was more interested in water birds or something. You never
could
know.
be. And we're going to be talking about water birds actually in this episode. So it's
Huh.
totally
So
possible.
it is possible that's where, okay, he has some very strong, good defining influences in his life.
Yes, very,
Wonderful.
very strong background. Everyone is encouraging him to learn everything from literature to biology. They're all
Yes.
like
Yes.
very encouraging and helping him.
What a fantastic environment to be brought up in.
But interestingly, about his education, from kindergarten to fourth grade, Don attended private school, but after that, his education became, in his own words, extraordinarily irregular, quote unquote.
Mm. Okay.
For a short time after the move to Boston, he attended public school, but after
Okay.
about a year there, his parents were convinced that Don wasn't learning anything except how to gamble from other kids. So, like, what is
Well, he's
this?
he's probably far ahead of his age group at this point.
Possibly, but I also think that a very alarming thing to them was that it turned out that the principal was staunchly against teaching evolution.
Oh,
So,
see, that makes
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense that they wouldn't like that.
yeah. I think there was some anecdote where little Dawn was like, "Don't we have a similar ancestors as monkeys?" And the principal just like blew up and was like, "Are you calling us
Mm.
monkeys?" And,
Mm.
that's not how
Yes.
God created us and that kind of thing. So,
The school was very much into creationism.
yes, exactly.
So this is actually now happening around 1925 or something, or 30 or
Yeah,
something
around
like
there.
that.
Hmm.
And it's very funny to me that 100 years later, we are
Yes.
back to
We're
the
still fighting it.
same spot. We are
Yes.
still fighting creationism.
Yeah. I don't know. But I was
Yes.
I was very glad to hear that his parents were not happy about this and they were
Hmm.
like, you're not going to that school anymore." So they pulled him
Yes.
out.
That's a very bold move, and it takes a lot of courage actually to do that.
Hmm.
Because you're now going against the flow, you're going against the trend, and there's going to be a lot of pressure from other people in society. You need to have the courage of your convictions in order to be
Yes,
able to make a move like that. As a parent, I mean, because you
definitely.
really do want the best for your child.
It is true. Like the other kids and parents kind of viewed Dawn as a little bit of like an overprotected kind of part of an eccentric family that didn't mingle well with the rest of,
Hmm.
the town.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit of that feeling that he's kind of an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
So they pulled him out of that school, the public school, and they sent him to a boarding school. But at the boarding school, he just spent so much time reading about fur trapping and wildlife that, again, his dad pulled him out and was like, "No, we're going to start homeschooling you now."
Okay.
And so he started teaching Dawn literature and like the Greek classics and Roman
Mm-hmm.
classics. And then he
Yes.
started hiring home tutors to teach him math and science and all those stuff, all that other stuff that he didn't know.
Okay.
So his education then started consisting of a few hours of tutoring and a few hours of chores or practicing practical skills with his mom. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was interesting. His mom was the one who taught him like how to use tools like hammer and saw and a
Mm.
screwdriver to repair
Nice.
things because his father had zero interest in any of that and so never
Nice.
bothered to learn.
They were a very out of norm family. The gender roles are reversed, and they
Yeah.
are going against the flow with public school.
Yeah.
Very nice, thinking for themselves.
Yeah. His mom also taught him how to type and how to sail and even
Mm.
helped him build his first flat bottomed boat when he was around 9 years old, which
Mm.
they named the bathtub.
Oh, I bet you there's a very good reason for that. I can
Yeah,
imagine this bathtub actually.
a little bathtub boat. Yeah. So I thought that was very cute.
That is cute. Hey, his mom sounds like a fun lady.
Yeah, really fun.
Yeah.
And it really instilled this love for sailing in him. And so sailing and boating became a really big hobby of his throughout his life. So after he did his tutoring and learning his practical skills, he had hours of free time, which he spent exploring outdoors. He was not a very athletic kid and was often sick with some mild flu or cold, but he
Mm,
just loved being out in the wild.
nice. That itself is a great learning experience.
Yes. He loved
Nice.
looking at animals, like finding the animals where they lived. He started trying to trap animals like he had read about in his favorite quote unquote books and
Mm-hmm,
magazines,
mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
he wasn't too successful at first. He also started keeping journals to keep track of all the animals that he saw each day.
Yeah,
So, beginnings of scientific recording and,
absolutely.
note keeping.
Yes.
He also spent a lot of time at the Boston Museum of Natural History, where he met two curators, Francis Harper and Clinton McCoy, who
Hmm.
redirected his interest in simply trapping and selling animal fur to collecting it and actually studying it.
Oh, fantastic. He has such strong, wonderful influences.
So by the time he was 15, Don had subscribed to the Journal of Mammalogy and was
Hmm.
reading scientific papers on small animals that he found in his area. His traps for small animals also got better, and soon he started collecting rabbits, skunks, and muskrats.
Ah, that must have been a fun experience trapping a skunk.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. There was a whole story about how he trapped a skunk and then had to put it in his car and hope that
Oh
it didn't
no.
spray him.
Oh no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I don't want to
Yes.
know more.
There's a lot of stories about him actually. So there's a
Hmm.
3-volume biography by Carolyn A. Ristow where she goes into all of these little anecdotes about how he tried to trap a skunk and how he went digging for some muskrat holes and things like that. I'm just
Hmm.
like, if you want to read her books or her biography about him, she's like the preeminent expert on Don Griffin. So
Fantastic.
yes, I'll link her books on the website so that people can see it. In 1932, when he was 17, he visited the Oliver Austin Bird Banding Station, where the owners taught him how to catch birds and attach a
Hmm.
metal ID band onto their
ID
leg.
tag. Okay.
And this helps them study all sorts of questions like where do the birds go when they migrate? How
Yeah.
long can they survive? And do males behave differently than females? Because now you can track them.
Yes. Do they come back every year to the same spaces?
Hmm.
Yes.
So initially, Don wasn't very interested in birds. He was more interested in small mammals. But this is where he first really got interested in bats because bats
Oh.
are small mammals that
Both.
fly.
Yes,
Yes.
they are bird-like mammals. It's a nice cross section in that Venn diagram between birds and mammals.
Yeah.
Who is there? That's the bat.
That's the bat. So he starts attaching these little metal bands to small
Hmm.
brown bats in his area in the caves where they hibernated. And this actually led to his first scientific publication in the Journal of Mammalogy entitled Marking Bats, in which he basically lays out that bird bands work great on bats too.
He's opening up a new resource. Yes.
Yeah, they don't fall off and the bats tolerate them pretty well, don't try to chew them off. However, this did lead to a bit of trouble with the authorities because it turns out that he was basically stealing bird bands from the Oliver Austin station. Yeah.
a, a minor protocol problem right there. That's hilarious that
Yeah.
he did not think to get his own bird bands and just kind of took some without thinking
Yes.
it through. I don't think he thought it through. I don't think he thought of it as stealing.
I don't think he thought it was such a big deal, but it turns out that these bands are given to the station by the government specifically to
Oh
study
no.
birds.
Oh, so it's a
Yeah.
federal offense now.
Yeah.
Oh shoot. Oh
Yeah.
no, poor guy.
So finally, after a lot of back and forth where he pleads his
Hmm.
case to the US Bureau of Biological Services,
Oh,
which
sad.
later becomes the Fish and Wildlife Service, And they reject him and they say, no, we're not giving you any bat bands, and he's like, come on, give them to me. Finally, he wins and they issue bat specific bands for him to use.
Okay, so it's a happy ending. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Soon he started to recruit his friends to help him band bats. He wrote, quote, I perfected what I have come to call the Tom Sawyer fence whitewashing method of recruiting college friends to participate in studies of animal behavior under natural conditions by letting them in on the secret that it is great fun, end quote.
He has a good sense of humor there. Tom Sawyer was a smart aleck, and it's fun to see Griffin followed the same pattern.
Yeah. It's like, come help me band
but
these
for a good
bats.
cause, for a very good cause.
Yeah,
yes.
and you're helping, and it's so much fun. You get to band bats. Who wouldn't want to do that?
And also, only if you are good. And then if it was true Tom Sawyer fashion, he would have even charged his friends for the privilege of banding bats.
Yes. I can totally see him turning it into a contest of like who can band the most bats.
Absolutely.
The summers between 1933 and 1938, Don and his friends managed to band 16,000 bats.
Oh, wait. Locally, they found 16,000 bats and they banded them.
I think he traveled a little bit. Like he might have gone up to Vermont and like found some bat caves and things like that. Like I think he did travel a little bit around the East Coast over the summers. But yeah, this isn't worldwide. This is like East Coast, a couple of states there in the Northeast.
That lays down the foundation for a very good study, though.
Yeah. Now you can identify all these bats that are flying around the East Coast.
Yes, so much information.
And around this time, he started making some pretty interesting preliminary observations, namely that if he captured a bat from one location and took it somewhere else to band it and released it in that other secondary location, the next day he would find the bat back at the same location he originally captured it at.
Wow, what GPS!
Yeah, so he captured it again, and this time he took it somewhere completely different, sometimes even
location.
farther away.
Yes.
Sometimes even out over the water. He got into his sailboat and went out over the water, and he released the bat. And the next day, the bat had found its way back to its original home again.
Wow. This is great. And I'm almost jealous of the fantastic GPS that these bats seem to have. You remember your childhood where I took you on this shortcut?
Oh, yes. And I remember the infamous shortcut story.
We were going to go for a walk, and then I was convinced that there was a shortcut to take us back home, and I made you little children walk like miles and miles and miles in my shortcut.
Yeah, this was like when I was like 9 or 10 or something.
Yes, yes.
My brother was, what, like 5 or 6?
5 or 6, and I was completely convinced that I knew the shortcut.
And we believed you. We were like, oh, she seems really sure of herself. We should follow her.
I'm always very sure of my wrong directions, actually. Yeah, you've seen that about me in airports as well, where I take off with great confidence in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And sometimes I still follow you. I'm like, she seems sure of herself. And then I'm like, wait, no, it's mom and directions. We need to we need to double check what she's doing.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but these bats, you could release them in random places and they would find their way home again. So this is right now still anecdotal. He's not actually studying this per se, but he's making this observation. Despite his crazy schooling during his teens, he was able to get into Harvard in 1934, where he focused heavily on biology. He was a solid B student. His uncle Alfred convinced him to take physics and physical chemistry courses, which he struggled to earn C's in.
Okay.
And he got B's in organic chemistry and atomic chemistry.
Okay.
But he got straight A's in any courses related to animals and mammals and birds.
He knows what he wants to do. He's found his life's passion.
Yeah. And again, I found it really relatable and nice to know that he wasn't a straight A student and he wasn't this like genius that was just so smart and everything. He struggled with some science courses, you know, and it's
he was good at what he was meant to be, and then he struggled with assimilating the rest of the information.
But that's a normal person. I like that. I like the stories where it's like, yeah, he struggled. He struggled with physics. And I'm like, relatable.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Outside of classes, he started working with a physiologist named Dr. John Welsh, who encouraged Don to pursue scientific research in bats because he
Hmm.
figured out his interest and was like, do it.
Yeah.
Together, they started asking questions like, if bats live in a dark cave and they can't see the
Hmm.
sun, how do they know
Hmm.
what time it is? Because they're nocturnal, so they must have some sort of internal clock that tells them, hey, it's dark outside, it's time to go wake up and go hunting for insects.
Hmm.
So, in short, they were asking, what does a bat's circadian rhythm look like?
Correct.
So, they captured small brown bats to keep in the lab and hooked them up to a machine that had a pen. And every
Hmm.
time the bat moved, the pen would move.
Okay.
So, you would almost get like a sleep monitor readout. And they found that in addition to a bat having an innate circadian rhythm, bats could also adjust their rhythm. So, for
Hmm.
example, if scientists fed them at the same time every day, then every 24 hours, just before feeding time, the bats would wake up and get more active, regardless of what time of day it was.
So you can manipulate their rhythm by giving them something they need. Yes.
Yeah. While he was an undergrad at Harvard, he also started some of the experiments that he's most famous for. So, as he's studying the bats, he starts to wonder, how are bats able to fly in the dark without banging
Hmm.
into anything?
Yes.
So in the 1760s, now we're going back like 2 centuries,
Hmm.
there was an Italian professor named Lazzaro Spallanzani
Hmm.
who had asked a similar question.
Okay.
He had found that some animals, like owls, need at least a tiny bit of light to be able to fly without bumping into obstacles. But if you blinded them, they couldn't fly at all.
Okay.
But bats could do it in total pitch blackness. Even when he blinded the bats, they were fine.
Wow.
Not only that, but they could hunt and feed themselves just as well as before they had been blinded.
So their sense of sight is not as crucial for their survival.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
Spallanzani was like, okay, so if their sight's not important, what other sense could they be using? And so he started trying to mess with the bats' other senses. He covered their ears, closed their mouths. He would like paint their wings so that with some, I don't know, like some waxy film or something so they couldn't feel anything. He would like close their nose. He would try all these things to mess with their other senses. And he found that when he covered their ears or closed their mouths, they failed to fly properly.
Got it.
But
Hmm.
anything else, like sight, smell, touch, didn't matter. Those things they didn't need to fly.
Got it. Hmm.
He wrote, thus, blinded bats are able to use their ears when they hunt insects. This
Hmm.
discovery is incredible. But the question was, what sounds were they even being able to hear to tell that there's an
Yes.
obstacle in the way? Because, like, they're in a cave, and these bats are avoiding the rocks, but
Yes.
rocks don't make sounds. So,
Correct.
how are they able to hear a rock? Or how
Yes.
are they able to hear an insect? Like, can they
Yes.
really truly hear the beat of an insect's wings or something? Like,
Yes.
that seems
Yeah.
really far
What
fetched.
exactly are they hearing in order to be able to navigate so accurately?
Yeah. Spallanzani was never able to take his research further than that. And so, because of
Okay.
that, no one really believed him. They were like,
Okay.
yeah, right. So, Don had read Spallanzani's original works, but now he had a new idea because World War I had just finished, or maybe like a decade ago.
Hmm.
And during World War I, the big story was that physicists had figured out how to use sonar or sound
Yes.
navigation and ranging to see underwater.
Right. Right.
And the way that worked is the submarine would emit a sound wave and listen to the echoes that bounce back.
Yes.
And so Dawn wondered if maybe the bats were doing the same thing, but at a much higher sound frequency than humans could hear.
Ah, what a good theory.
And he thought this because a bat's ear is very unique. And he knew
Hmm.
all about like this gigantic ear, so big compared to the rest of its body. And it's shaped
Hmm.
like a funnel, which can focus even the smallest of sounds into the ear.
Oh,
And if you think about it, humans can typically hear a range between 20 hertz, which is the very lowest note or very lowest pitch that we can
okay.
hear, up to 20,000 hertz, which is the very highest. And by the way, you can go on YouTube. They have like a
Uh-huh.
human audio test where they play this range from 20 to 20,000 hertz. And you can listen to hear when your hearing drops off.
Interesting.
Yeah. I personally can hear between 25 hertz and 13 to 14,000 hertz, after which it
Got
gets
it.
too high pitched for me to hear.
But humans have the capacity to hear higher or a bit lower.
Yes. I've probably
Okay.
ruined some of my ears with all the like music that I listen to and stuff like that constantly with my earphones in. And I think also like as you age, it also starts to drop off.
I'd like to check mine. You should put that
Yeah,
link over
we'll
there.
do this afterwards. We'll see how low and high you can hear.
Okay.
So humans are up to 20,000 hertz. On the other hand, most bats can hear quote unquote ultrasonic sounds up to 120,000 hertz. And some can even hear past 200,000 hertz.
Which means 6 to 10 times higher.
Yep.
Wow.
So Dawn has this theory that, maybe these bats are emitting sounds in that frequency that we can't hear, but the bats can hear. But how do you study that? So some of his fellow students told him about a physics professor at Harvard named George Washington Pierce, who had invented something called a parabolic horn that could detect very high frequency sounds and translate them into a frequency that humans could hear.
Got it.
So they urged Dawn to ask Professor Pierce if he could borrow this instrument to detect whether the bats were making ultrasonic sounds. And honestly, he was a bit scared at first because remember, he was a solid C+ student in physics.
Yes.
And now he needs to go like knock on the door of a physics professor.
Yes.
Be like, hey,
But what a collaboration. I was about to say with all the sonar technology for detecting sounds, etc. That's all coming under the realm of physics. So yeah, he's a solid C or a B, but there is interdisciplinary collaboration in the horizon.
He just wasn't, he knew that. He just wasn't sure if the professor would want to work with him because he's such a poor student in physics. He was like,
no, I bet you the professor must have been interested.
You are correct. He was thrilled. He was extremely excited to help Dawn study his bats. So sure enough, when they turned on the parabolic horn and held the bat near it, they found that even when the bats didn't seem to be making any sounds at all that their ears could pick up, the parabolic horn was emitting signals to indicate that the bat was making ultrasonic sounds.
Wow, nice. What a finding.
And these sounds were extremely short, just barely a click. That's all that they weren't making these like long, notes or anything. So their next test was to let the bat loose and fly around the physics lab and see if the bats made the clicking noise when they came near obstacles.
Give me a second to absorb this imagery here of this bat flying around a physics lab. Interesting. Because until you said that, I was still thinking that they had gone to the cave where the bat lived. But no, this makes more sense to just capture the bat and bring it in.
I think they had to use like some soundproofing and stuff to make sure the parabolic horn didn't pick up any other extra sounds. It was only picking up the bat. So
they
this
needed
is a controlled environment.
They needed a controlled environment. This is so fascinating that they would a bat running around a physics lab.
They let the bats loose. The bats are flying around the physics lab. They turn on the parabolic horn and they hear nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Oh.
So even though the bats are flying around the room perfectly and they're avoiding all obstacles, the parabolic horn wasn't picking up any sounds. This was a huge disappointment and very confusing to both Dawn and Professor Pierce. They had been so sure that they were on the right track.
I was sure of it too while you're narrating the story that they're going to hear all sorts of things.
I was sure of it when I was researching the story. I was like, what do you mean they heard nothing?
How can this be?
So they wrote up their findings in 1938 about the bats making ultrasonic sounds. And they still tentatively suggested that they could use the sounds to navigate, but they had no evidence that the bats were making sounds while flying. So Don continued to struggle with this question. And the following year, he met another student named Robert Galambos, who is basically the Robin to his Batman.
Every Batman needs a Robin.
Now they're unstoppable. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Robert Galambos was particularly interested in studying animal physiology and hearing. So, he was very interested in the bat's ear and the way that the
Mm,
ear was shaped and how it functioned to help the bat hear.
yes.
So, they struck up a partnership.
Okay.
They repeated Spallanzani's tests again
Mm,
and found the
mm,
same things that he had, that blind bats were able to navigate and fly perfectly well. But if you closed their ears or mouth, the bats refused to fly, or they did so very awkwardly. So they were like, yeah, the sounds they're making must be important for navigation.
absolutely.
Eventually, after all this testing, they came to realize that the problem had been that both the bats and the parabolic horn were extremely focused in a single direction. So, if
Oh,
the
oh,
bat was held next to the horn, it was basically clicking straight into the horn. But if the
yeah.
bat was flying around, its sound was extremely focused in only the direction that its head was facing. And so the horn wasn't
Yes.
able to pick it up.
Oh, got it. Oh, the bat was still emitting those sharp ultrasonic sounds, but
Yes.
the sound waves are going in a very limited direction, and the
Yeah.
instrument is not able to pick it up.
Yeah. And the instrument itself is also only able to pick up sounds in the direction that it's facing.
Correct.
So their theory had been right.
I'm glad he didn't throw that theory out because it does make a lot of sense.
Yes, it
It's
does.
just it's the limitations of the experiment and the
Yeah,
instruments that they had at that time.
exactly. Now things have gotten a lot better and
Of
we
course,
are
yes,
a lot more sensitive and things like that.
yes.
But yeah, at the
Goodness,
time,
even our cell phones seem to pick up everything from multiple
I know.
rooms. Anyway, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
They also experimented to see how small an object had to be for a bat to detect it and dodge around it. And they
Hmm.
found that bats could dodge wires as thin as 1 millimeter, which is about as thick as a piece of paper.
Nice.
And by the way, there's also videos of this on YouTube if you want to go see.
A bat dodging around a thin.
Yeah, like, really old-timey video from like the 1930s or 40s of these bat
Wow,
experiments where their
such
bat is just
exciting
flying
times.
around these wires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
I'll link that on the website too if anyone wants to go watch.
absolutely. This is absolutely fascinating.
Hi everyone, Aarati here. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If so, and you wish someone would tell your science story, I founded a science communications company called SciComm, that's SYKOM, that can help. SciComm blends creativity with scientific accuracy to create all types of science communications content, including explainer videos, slide presentations, science writing, and more. We work with academic researchers, tech companies, nonprofits, or really any scientist to help simplify your science. Check us out at scikommer.com. That's SYKOMMER.com. Okay, back to the story. As his time as an undergraduate student came to an end, Don started thinking that maybe he should take a break from bats.
Oh,
Later on, he wasn't sure why he didn't just continue with bats, but he
mm,
thinks in general there was a lot of negativity around simply continuing his bat navigation experiments. A lot of
mm-hmm,
professors were like, yeah, that's cute, but you need to do something real and like more
mm,
important for your PhD.
mm, mm,
So they just didn't think that these bat navigation studies were on the same level as like studying physiology or biochemistry or something
yes.
like that.
Yes, the bat studies did not have the level of credibility needed for a doctorate.
Yes,
Ah,
exactly.
so
Yeah.
sad. Mm.
So he found a professor at Harvard named Carl Lashley, who was both in the biology and the psychology departments. Professor Lashley had written a paper on homing terns. So these
Mm.
are birds that were able to find their way back home from long distances. And Don
That
was like,
he
hey,
knows all about this.
yes,
He
bats
knows
can do
all
that
about
too.
his he knows all about that with his birds and his bats and the theft from the federal government of the
Yes.
band.
So Don approached him about doing his PhD under him and further studying this homing ability to see if local birds could orient their way homewards even if they were in an unfamiliar place.
Hmm.
So he starts studying this, and at first the results weren't very impressive. he started studying petrels and then herring gulls, which are both
Mm-hmm.
seabirds.
Mm-hmm.
And he would take them far away to an unfamiliar place and release them. Eventually, most of them would return, but only after a really long time,
Okay.
sometimes many days later. And
Okay.
they would like take breaks and they would sit and eat and they would
Mm-hmm.
sleep. And he was just like,
Yeah.
what are these birds doing? You know?
Yes. Yes.
Don couldn't tell whether the birds were just randomly flying around until they found something by chance that was
Yes.
familiar. And then they were like,
Yes.
I know that. And then they
Yes.
figured out their way home.
Yeah.
Or the other option is that they do actually have some system in place to figure out how to get home and they're doing
Yeah.
something, but he couldn't figure out
Yeah.
what it was.
Or they're just, smelling the roses along the way. You never know.
Yeah.
They know
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing, but it's like life is a journey. It's not,
Yes.
I don't have to be at the destination when you
Yeah.
say so. I'll get
Yeah.
there when I get there.
I'm picking up new information here.
Absolutely.
I'm a worldly bird now.
That's right.
There's also no GPS tracking systems at the time, so
Hmm.
he couldn't the way we would do today is just attach this GPS to the bird and then sit in our lab and
Yeah.
watch the bird fly around from the
Relax.
comfort of
Yes.
our own home, you
Yeah.
know?
And the computer will make all the markings to tell you
Yeah,
where,
map it
where
out
the
for us
bird is,
beautifully.
map it out,
Yes. Give us all
find
the
me.
statistics. How fast did they take?
You could have it on your phone. You could be at dinner and you could see it on the phone where your bird is.
Yeah, you just have hundreds of birds on your Find Me app. It's like, oh, there
Yeah,
goes bird 188.
that's
You know?
right.
Because there's no GPS tracking system, really the only way he can track them is with his own eyes. And so he's using binoculars when he releases them to try and figure out where they're going, but he would lose sight of them pretty quickly.
But I'm assuming he does have the banding on them. It's just that he's wanting to also see what
Yeah.
they do in between.
Yes, he has the banding on them. So once they pop back up in some place that somebody is monitoring, then they can
Yeah.
say, oh, they can ring him
They
and say, hey.
they came from A to B or whatever.
Yeah, but in between what happened between points in A and B, he has no idea what the bird was
And
doing.
that's what he's keen on figuring out.
Yeah. So in comes Uncle Alfred again.
Hmm.
He introduced Don to another professor at Harvard named Alexander Forbes, who was a physiologist and also an aviator. So Professor Forbes was like, hop in my plane and we'll track your birds by air.
Fantastic. Oh my God. What a fun life.
Really fun. Gets more fun. So he and Don went up in a small plane, and Professor Forbes told Don that when they were about 2,000 feet up in the air, Don should open the plane door and throw the bird out.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when Don did this, the open door of the plane started to act like a rudder and set the plane into a spin.
No way.
Don wrote, quote, "This was exciting, and I had no idea whether it would be the end of us. I remember watching the Connecticut River rotating slowly beneath us."
Whoa.
Of course, recovering from spins at 2,000 feet is routine, and Forbes had no difficulty leveling off the plane in ample time.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know if I'll die, but this is really fun.
This is really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say, but clearly, this was not the ideal way to start following a herring gull from the air.
Okay.
He circled a few times looking for, but saw no trace of it. So in that plane spinning, they lost track of the bird.
They lost the bird. Okay.
Yeah.
Poor fellows.
Yeah.
I can imagine the frustration.
Yeah. That wasn't a good idea.
Horrible, truly horrible.
This really has Tom Sawyer shenanigans written all over it.
I tell you, these guys are fantastic.
So the next time they learned, they decided to keep the bird at the airport when they took off. And then once the plane was up high enough, they would signal to someone at the airport to release the bird.
Oh, to release the bird. Okay.
Yeah. And then they would start to follow it.
Okay.
So that worked much better. By 1941, Don had taken flying lessons to become a licensed pilot and even bought his own small plane. However, it was the beginning of World War II now, and it was becoming clear by 1941 that the U.S. was likely going to join the war. So everyone was on really high alert. And so Don realized that if he goes around flying his plane randomly, it starts to become a little bit dangerous in case
Oh,
the
yes.
military mistook him for some spy or enemy or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So he
Absolutely.
soon had to stop flying around.
Okay.
Throughout his PhD work, though, on birds, Don kept his eye on bats, and he kept up with the
Mm.
research that his friend Robert Galambos had been doing to further
Mm-hmm.
understand how bats hear. In 1944, Don coined the term echolocation to describe the way
Ah.
bats navigate similarly to sonar. He also got married to a woman named Ruth Castle and had a
Mm.
child. This may have been kind of strategic, as
Mm.
family men were less likely to be drafted into the war.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But after Pearl Harbor, Don did start doing military related work to help the war effort. So
Okay.
he put his schooling on hold. He started working at the SS Stevens Psychoacoustic Laboratory, working on improving voice communication systems used by the
Mm.
military.
Mm.
One day, while he's working there, he gets a call from a man named Lytle Adams, who was an
Mm-hmm.
inventor, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and he was looking for a bat expert because
Okay.
he had an
Mm-hmm.
idea about creating bat bombs.
Bat bombs.
Yes. So basically, Lytle had this idea that in order to avenge Pearl Harbor, he wanted to
Oh.
attach little bombs to bats, which could be
Oh.
released in Tokyo.
Oh my goodness.
And his idea was that the bats would fly into people's homes and then the bombs
Uh-huh.
would explode. And so
Oh.
the home structures would just burn down completely.
I
So
see. I
this
see.
is his grand plan. Don was skeptical, but he did some preliminary experiments and he was
Mm-hmm.
like, theoretically, it might work if they
Mm-hmm.
were able to develop bombs that were lighter than 3 grams. Otherwise, the bats
Oh.
wouldn't be able to fly with them.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he sent that report to Lytle Adams, and then he heard nothing about the project again, and he assumed that
Okay.
it died. He was
Okay.
like, yeah, how are you going to create a bomb less than 3
Which is
grams?
less than 3 grams. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, this is a stupid idea to begin with. Like, this is.
Yes.
But then 2 years later, an organic chemistry professor named Louis Pfizer at Harvard called him and asked him what he thought about the bat bomb project, which was now being called Project X-ray for some reason.
Is this the same Pfizer who started the Pfizer
No, it's not
laboratories?
spelled. I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right. It's Fieser.
Oh, Pfizer. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Professor Pfizer was being asked to develop an effective napalm that would be used in the bat bomb devices. And he's asking Don, hey, what do you think about this project? Like, should
Hmm.
I be going in and developing this? Should I be trying
Right.
this? So Don told him again that he was highly skeptical that this project would work at all. But Pfizer was a bit more optimistic and said, okay, I'll work on it.
Okay.
And again, Don fell out of the loop.
Okay.
Pfizer did, in fact, end up successfully inventing a military grade napalm. But
Okay.
before Project X ray could be seen all the way through, the US dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and
Yeah.
Nagasaki,
But why would you
effectively
bother with
ending the
little?
war.
Why would you bother with little bat bombs if you had the big bazooka?
But
Yes.
there were a few places where I saw the Manhattan Project and Project X-ray kind of
Mm-hmm.
being pitted head to head, and the US government is trying to determine which one is more worth funding and more, more viable.
It had some traction.
It did have some traction
Mm-hmm.
despite Don's skepticism that this would ever work.
Yes. Yes. And if you
Hmm.
have studied an animal for that long, you develop a deep respect for it. And for a person with such deep respect for bats to be asked to basically create kamikaze bats
Yes.
is not
I
right.
couldn't imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. How can you? How can you imagine?
When he has
That's
such high
terrible.
respect for them and their intelligence and how they're able to
Yes.
navigate and
Yes.
their like superhuman abilities.
Absolutely. I'm glad that the project died then eventually.
Many years later, Don was upset to see, though, that there was a report from Lytle Adams about Project X-ray, which
Mm.
insinuated that Don had strongly supported the project
Mm-hmm.
when actually the opposite was true. And
Correct.
yet over time, the story has been twisted by many media outlets claiming that he encouraged this project and thought it was a great idea. So just wanted to set the record straight on that he did not.
Insult upon injury. How typical.
Yeah. Don worked in a few different labs to support the war effort, but once the war was over, he realized that he had been affiliated with Harvard for about 12 years and decided it was time to move on. He happened to know some biologists at Cornell University and wrote inquiring about becoming an assistant professor in comparative physiology there. He received strong support, particularly from Professor Howard Adelman, who was building up a department of zoology at Cornell. And so he and his family, now with 4 children, moved to Ithaca, New York.
Nice. That's where I came initially.
Yeah. Very first home in the U.S.?
Very first home in the U.S. was in Ithaca, New York. Beautiful place.
At Cornell, he continued to study both bats and birds and how they're able to navigate. In 1948, his mind basically exploded when he read a paper by Carl von Frisch, who went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1973. And he had showed that bees were able to communicate complex information about specific locations by doing a quote-unquote waggle dance. So the bees find a source of pollen or sugar or something. They come back to the hive, they do a little dance, and then all the bees in the hive get that information and they all go over to that source of pollen.
So many ways of communication. Fantastic.
And so Don was like, dude, if insects can understand each other and even communicate complex information like geographic locations to each other, then birds and bats have to be able to do it too. Because
absolutely. They are a species of a higher order.
Yeah. So Don immediately set up his own beehive and started studying their interactions for himself. And he invited von Frisch to Cornell to give a series of lectures. In 1951, Don takes his studies in echolocation even further, showing that bats actually use echolocation to hunt insects. This was a very surprising discovery because until that point, even Don had thought that echolocation was just a way to avoid crashing into stationary obstacles.
Whoa.
So the fact that they could use it to hunt tiny, mobile, moving insects is crazy.
Tells you that their echolocation system is highly sophisticated.
Yes, very highly developed. And the other thing that they noticed was that as the bat got closer to its prey, its clicking noise would speed up as it honed in on its target.
Because it's really now defining it more quickly. Further fine-tuning that exact position of a moving object.
Yes. After this discovery, he also had the opportunity to travel to Panama to study tropical fruit bats, where he was able to learn that these bats that ate fruits used echolocation differently than bats that ate insects. So that just opened up a whole new field of comparative echolocation for him and other scientists to study. In 1953, he returned to Harvard's biology department to teach zoology. Over time, he kept on studying how bats use echolocation, and as technology improved, his measurements got more and more precise.
Yes.
He was able to rule out the possibility that bats were listening to the sound of flying insect wings beating to locate them, that they really were purely using the bounce back of the echolocation.
Their own echoes, yes.
Yes. And then the other kind of experiment or story I wanted to include in here, because it's funny, is that once there was a rare group of red bats that were sighted in Massachusetts at a golf course.
Okay.
So Don convinced a very reluctant golf course owner to let him study the bats by bringing a truck full of parabolic detectors and microphones onto the course. Wow. He just had to promise the owner not to tell any of the golfers what he was doing.
Yes.
But then, of course, that just led to wild speculation that he was studying radio waves coming from the ionosphere. Oh. So people are like, what is this guy doing running around pointing this thing at the sky?
Yes.
He also did another interesting experiment where he studied whether bats could tell the difference between certain things that they were chasing.
Mm.
So to do this experiment, he and a colleague threw mealworms up in the air,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
mealworms can't fly, normally.
Okay.
So this is like a new thing for the bats that's in the air. And
Yeah.
once the bat learned that, hey, that thing that's soaring through the air is food,
Yeah.
actually, Don and his colleagues switched it up and they started tossing pebbles that were about the same size
Oh.
as the mealworms.
Okay.
And at first, the bats also chased the pebbles, but
Yeah.
then they realized the pebbles were inedible, of course.
Correct.
And so soon they stopped chasing the pebbles altogether and only chased the mealworms.
Oh, they were able to distinguish between those two. Whoa, what a sophisticated system.
Yes. He also teamed up with neurophysiology experts to study how the bat's brain lights up when it hears different things. So he's doing all these different experiments, and
Wow.
there's so many. Like, I'm just trying to get the most important ones or the most interesting
Yes.
ones, but there's just so many experiments that he's doing on bats and birds and bees and
Yeah.
everything.
Such novel thoughts, such novel ideas, which we take for granted today.
Yeah. And unfortunately, weren't super appreciated in his time
Mm.
either,
Mm.
because a lot of the professors at Harvard disagreed still with him being a professor and him even being chair of the department because they
Mm-hmm.
still thought animal behavior was not real science. It was just
Oh,
observational and it wasn't on the same level as
got it.
biology,
Mm.
physiology, those kinds of things. And so I think he faced a lot of criticism, a lot of people trying to undermine his position. Also, sometime in the early 1960s, he and Ruth got a divorce. Not
Oh
sure
no.
why. But in 1965, he got remarried to a woman named Jocelyn Crane, who was an
Okay.
expert on crustaceans. And she had been an assistant to William Beebe. And if that name rings a bell for any of our listeners, it's because of our episode on Eugenie Clark, the shark lady, whose hero was William Beebe. He was the guy who
Yes.
went down in the bath escape and everything. And she was like, I want to be like him.
Wow. Beautiful connections.
In 1965, he was given the opportunity to organize and become director of an Institute for Research in Animal Behavior at Rockefeller University. And
Mm.
so, of course,
Mm.
he immediately jumped at that chance.
Of
He was
course.
like, goodbye, Harvard people who don't believe in me. I'm going to
Correct.
Rockefeller to direct this
Absolutely.
institute.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
At Rockefeller, he did a bunch more experiments on bats, bees, birds. I can't go into it. It's really fascinating, but just we'd be here all day. But there is one more concept that he's really famous for voicing.
Huh.
In 1976, he writes a book called The Question of Animal Awareness, where he puts
Mm.
forward the argument that animals don't just react to stimuli,
Mm.
but they're actually conscious of what they're doing. They can
Mm.
think, they can plan, and experience sensations in much the same way that humans can.
Yes.
And he argues that if we don't study this side of animal behavior, then our understanding of cognition will always be incomplete. This was a radical
Yes.
idea at the time because many psychologists, and even today, some psychologists believe that consciousness is a uniquely human trait,
Oh,
that
I see.
only people are aware of the fact that we are people and we are moving through this world as people and that there are different experiences than
Yes.
ours. In contrast, they believe that all animal behaviors that we observe, everything from navigation to communication or
Yes.
even tool use, are just
Yeah.
instinctual and
Yes.
or due to training. We can train
Yes.
animals to do something or not do
Right.
something,
Right. Right.
but they don't think that animals are conscious of themselves being an animal, or they don't think there's any strategy behind it per se. There's
Yes.
no plan.
So he was far ahead of his time actually. He was a genius who was not completely recognized in his own time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
I think the biggest sticking point for scientists, like we mentioned in our previous episode about Alfred Binet, was this idea of positivism.
Yes.
Because if an animal has consciousness, there has to be a way to measure it. A lot of scientists have
Mm.
this, like, if
Mm.
it's a pure science and if it's truly a fact, then there
Yes.
needs to be a tangible way to measure
Yes.
quantitatively this
Yes.
thing. And how do
Yes.
you measure consciousness, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you can't really ask a bat, like, hey, what's it like being a bat? Do
Yes.
you enjoy being able to fly around,
That's right.
hunting
Yes.
insects?
Yeah. How
Like,
are you going to determine? How are you quantify those things? How would you communicate with the bat to be able to quantify that correctly?
yeah. And I think this was a question that Don himself was always endlessly fascinated by. Like, even when he was a little kid, and primarily what got him into animal research was this kind of question of like, I wonder what it's like to be a bat. If I were a
Mhm.
bat, I
Yeah.
wonder what it would be like to fly up in the air at
Yeah.
night and go
Yeah.
hunting insects. Or even if
Yes.
I was a muskrat, what would
Yeah.
it be like to be go digging in the dirt and.
That's right.
So he was fascinated by this question, and he did think that animals kind of were aware that,
Mhm.
yes, I am a muskrat digging in the dirt, or I am a bat flying in the air, which a lot of scientists strongly disagreed with him and actually thought he was going senile for
Yes.
putting this
Yes.
idea out.
I can see that. I can see the resistance to a concept like that.
Yes. And definitely also because I think a lot of scientists believed that
Yes.
consciousness is what separates us humans from the animals.
Yeah. Yeah. And the minute you say that they have consciousness, now you're just taking advantage of a species not capable of defending itself as well as you can. And so you are
Yeah.
able to slaughter it for its meat and do whatever you want with it and destroy its home for building your own. All sorts of things you're doing without compunction because you're able to assign a lower level of consciousness to that animal.
There's
But
a
the
lot
minute
of
you
like moral and ethical implications once you
Absolutely.
start doing.
Yeah, once you go down that road, you have to start questioning the level of ethical behavior that you're willing to assign to yourself.
Yeah, he faced a lot of skepticism for saying this, but he did think that there were ways to prove it, or would be ways maybe in the future to prove it. This is still like the 70s, 80s time period. And he thought that there was the possibility of getting concrete evidence of animal consciousness by doing comparative neurology studies to see what parts of the brain lit up and if those parts of the brain correlated with human consciousness. Also, studying how different animals react to new challenges. So, for example, going back to the bee experiment, if a bee comes to the hive and does its waggle dance, informing all the bees that there's pollen in this direction, it's been observed that not all the bees fly off to find that. Some
Ah,
will stay
yes.
back.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, is that a conscious decision? Do they make a
Absolutely.
choice that,
I
I'm
bet you
not
they
going to go
do.
and I'm going to stay?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is a plan there.
So if we study those kinds of behaviors more and the differences between like some of the bees go and some of the bees stay, why did the bees who stay, what happened in their brains that made them stay versus what happened in the bees' brains that went? What's the
Yes.
difference? Maybe that would
Yes.
kind of probe at that consciousness question a little bit more.
Yes. You see that behavior, that conscious decision between two choices in so many species, like even birds that fly in formation. How do they decide who is the leader bird? How do they
Yes.
decide that now it's another bird's turn to be the leader bird? There's method there. It's not randomness.
Yeah.
So that indicates a level of higher consciousness and the ability to strategize and think it out, and
Yes.
that's very hard for human beings to digest, because then we human beings are partners in the ecosystem with these other species. Right now we are more comfortable with looking at ourselves as the apex species, and
Hmm.
everybody else is around just to serve us, and that whole idea is torpedoed out completely.
Yeah. And so he's facing a lot of backlash. The other piece of evidence that he thought we could study a bit more was the ability of animals to learn new things. And he came up with the example of ravens. There was a study on ravens that could learn to select boxes with a certain number of spots on them, up
Hmm.
to 7 spots.
Hmm.
So if you told the raven, get the box that has 3 spots on it versus get this box with 5 spots on it, it could tell the difference.
In fact, there is a study somewhere, because crows have been studied, And there are lots of stories, anecdotal stories, and various things. We know the famous story where the crow drops stones into a
Mhm.
small pot of water so that the water rises and it can drink.
Or,
They
like,
use
I've heard they, like, fly really high with snails and stuff and drop them so that the ground cracks the
That's right. The
shell
ground
of
cracks them.
whatever it
Yeah. And
is.
all
Yeah.
this is evolved over time rather than
Mhm.
so there is documentation of that. So yeah, they
Yes.
do have the intelligence to learn.
Yeah.
It's true of not just humans, it's true of all species.
And I think that was the big argument that was happening was Dawn was saying that these crows are strategizing and they're able to come up with a plan to keep dropping pebbles into the jar for the water to rise or to
Yes.
keep
Yes.
dropping the snail from higher heights so that its shell would crack. But
Yes.
his retractors or naysayers were saying this is all purely instinct. They're just doing this because either they were trained to do it or they just instinctually know how to do this.
Mm,
It's
mm,
not something that they are planning and strategizing.
mm.
Um, but for Dawn, it was like it's really clear that it is a plan, it is a
Yes.
strategy, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So Dawn writes two more books on animal consciousness: Animal
Mm,
Thinking in
mm,
1984, where he presents evidence from his navigation studies that animals don't just respond, but they actually plan out alternate routes to their destination.
mm,
And he also wrote Animal Minds in 1992, which focused on evidence from studies in elephants, dolphins, and primates and other animals,
mm.
where he argues that these animals show self awareness through things
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
the mirror self recognition test, where if you hold a
Mm.
mirror up in front
Yes.
of them, they realize
Yes.
that that's a reflection of themselves. It's not
Themselves.
another
Yes.
elephant or it's
Yes.
not another
Yes.
dolphin.
Yes.
And these animals also show other emotions like empathy, which, you know,
Mm.
is also very much rooted in being self aware, being conscious.
There are so many stories now of these animals like dolphins or even sharks who
Hmm.
come up to divers and swimmers asking for help with nets or harpoons that they have got stuck in. So
Yes.
it's unimaginable to me that people can be detractors of this thought process that animals have their own awareness and consciousness.
Yeah, I was like, you know, it's really weird. Even living with a dog, we have a pet dog, Cairo, and the way he looks at you sometimes, or the way he like interacts with us sometimes, I'm like, he is very self aware. He knows
Yes.
his place in the house and he knows when
Yes.
he needs to ask for help. You know,
Yes.
he knows when he wants something or doesn't want something.
He rolls his eyes when we take too long to actually get out the door for his walking time.
Yeah,
You
he
can
heaves
I
a
can
big
literally
sigh.
yes,
Like,
big sighs, rolling his eyes like, oh my
yeah.
God, you guys, get your act together.
I'm just thinking, like, none of you science retractors must have pets because I think anyone with a pet would have realized that animals
Yeah,
have to be self aware.
absolutely. Yes.
In 1986, Don retired from Rockefeller, but he continues to teach as a visiting lecturer at Princeton, and he
Hmm.
teaches an undergrad course at Harvard. He
Yes.
also continues to work on gathering evidence for animal consciousness, and he
Yes.
continues to set up experiments on literally any animal he thinks has strong potential for proving his theories. For example, in 1996 to 1998, he organized a study that put cameras and microphones in beaver dams to study their
Mm.
communication and teamwork.
Yes. Yes.
In 2000, he and another zoologist named Katie Boynton Payne started planning to set up a series of studies on elephant behavior and communications.
Oh, they are a magnificent species.
Yes. And in 2001, he published one more book called Animal Minds: Beyond Cognition and Consciousness. Don passed away on November 7th, 2003, at his home in Lexington, Massachusetts, still in the middle of doing numerous field studies on beavers, bees, and elephants. He was
He
88
kept
years
at
old.
it. 88. He
Hmm.
kept at it until the
Yep.
very end. Good for him.
In his obituary, the New York Times wrote, quote, "Many scientists say the only reason that animal thinking was given any consideration at all was that Dr. Griffin suggested it." End quote.
Hmm. That's a beautiful legacy. Beautiful legacy.
And today, there's a lot of evidence, as we were saying, that proves Don was correct. So
Of
science
course.
finally caught up with him. Most notably, on July 2012, leading experts in neuroscience and animal cognition at the University of Cambridge signed the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, affirming that many animals, including mammals, birds, and maybe even octopuses, possess the neurological ability to be conscious and share some of the same brain structures as humans that allow human consciousness.
Wow.
There's
Uh,
still so much
Word.
to explore in this
Yes.
whole realm, but he's the one who really
Yeah.
kickstarted it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Beautiful. This
that's
is a
that's the
beautiful
story of John
story.
Griffin.
I enjoyed it so much. I didn't know anything about it, but it was fantastic. It was wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah, I
I
highly
loved it.
recommend going and reading more about him. There's so much information that I had to leave out just due to time and due to like I need to finish this story at some point, you know.
No, all we can do is create a window into the lives of these wonderful people who really changed the landscape for humanity. And
Yeah.
then hopefully they are inspiring enough for us to go chase further and find out more information.
And as I mentioned, I put all of my sources on the website. So if anyone wants to go and read more, it's all there for you to read. And I'm sure there's stuff I've missed. So let me know if there's something exciting that I've missed. I would love to hear it because it sounds like he had a very exciting life.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Aarti.
Yes. I'm glad you enjoyed it and happy
Loved,
Halloween.
loved it. Loved it.
Thanks for listening. If you have a suggestion for a story we should cover or thoughts you want to share about an episode, reach out to us at smarttpodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Smart Tea Podcast and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a rating or comment. It helps us grow. New episodes are released every other Wednesday. See you next time.